Hello and welcome to Skip the First Episode, the podcast where we try to get our friends into the things we love. I'm Jeremiah.
And I'm Phil.
Phil, what do you know about Nathan for You?
My name is Nathan Fielder, and I graduated from one of Canada's top business schools with really good grades. Now, I'm using my knowledge to help struggling small business owners make it in this competitive world.
It's a guy who is somehow, against all odds, asked to aid people in their quest to improve their business.
This is Nathan for You.
He gives them purposefully bad advice and half the time might even bankrupt these poor people and their little mom and pop shop. So that's my impression of it. I've seen a tiny bit and it seems like he's giving what is clearly bad advice, but because it's a television show, these people feel compelled to act on his advice. And then it's always the look on your face. I mean, for the listener is one of, wait, is this man a bad person? But I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but it seems like he's giving them bad advice on purpose.
That's what I hope. Now, I remember trying to get you into this show probably back in 2014.
Something like that.
And at the time, I didn't know anyone who was into it. And I was actually kind of frustrated because when I got into it, and also my wife, who was not my wife at the time, but we both love it.
Yeah.
I was having a hard time getting anyone else into it. So I recommended it to you, and you could not get beyond the first episode.
No.
Which I understand because I didn't watch them in the right order at all.
Yeah.
So this is a skip the first episode show. I mean, I don't think it's awful, but it's a really bad one to start with.
Yeah. I mean, that's the point of this whole podcast is that what's the best way to get someone into it? Yeah, not the one that turns everybody off, you know.
And I've heard other people say that too. Some people, they tried the first episode and it just stops them cold.
Yeah.
But I had a kind of similar trajectory because I remember when the show started airing and they were playing clips from this first episode. It's the one where it's a frozen yogurt shop and he suggests that they try a poo flavored yogurt.
Right.
What I learned from that episode is that it's a sort of chemical process where they're able to create a flavor based on its components, but not have any of the actual material.
I figured that, but ew.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's the... we're getting ahead of myself, but I don't... Why? What's the point?
I remember I saw that clip, like people were sharing it, and I was like, okay. Yeah, I mean, that did not capture me. And it wasn't until an episode from his second season.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of this. It's called...
I'm open to this.
Okay, here's the thing. I was originally going to show you this episode, and then I decided against it.
You chickened out.
Anyway.
You wimp.
But the episode, I don't know. Anything's possible. You know how it is with this. We always go in with one plan, and then we come up with a different approach.
That is true.
Okay, so there's an episode called Dumb Starbucks from season 2.
Okay.
And that's an episode where it became a news story. And I remember hearing about this just in the news. And so I just remember reading about this, that there was a dumb Starbucks that had opened. I had no idea what it was. And then when I realized that it was Nathan Fielder, that's what got my attention. And so I watched that episode, and that's what got me into the show.
Okay. I see. I'm open to this. I'll put it this way. My takeaway from it was, you know what? I love awkward, realistic humor.
Yeah.
And how much more realistic does real life get? Well, I think that's the line for me, is that when David Brent does something, I kind of go, oh my God, that is such a well-written scene. It's so perfectly awkward, man. If that was in real life, I wouldn't even know what to do. Being an audience member for something that is scripted and they worked hard to make this funny, I laugh. Peep Show, I laugh. Mm-hmm. I think the problem with this show, for me at least so far, has been, yeah, but this is real. So it's hard. It's much harder for me to go, because that actually happened to these poor people. And secondly, it's not just that you put someone in an awkward situation. This is someone's business that you're kind of toying with, like a cat with a mouse that's half dead. And I'm just thinking, like, to me, that's where I go, this is a very tough sell because this is someone's livelihood, perhaps. So I'm very excited for this episode because you've picked something that I've already had a very visceral, why would you play with someone's life like that? So if you can get me to like this, this will be a huge... The stakes are high for you right now, Mr.
Yes, I'm fully prepared to lose this one.
No, it's okay. I'm excited. I mean, this is an exciting one for me.
So that's why I decided to try a different approach. I was going to show you Dumb Starbucks, but I watched it again with my wife last night, and we were laughing all the way through, but we were also saying, Phil's not going to like this. So, I mean, just based on... Again...
I'm excited to watch that one now, too.
It's one of those things where I think if you stay with it, it's okay in the end.
Oh, my God.
But there's a lot of bumps in the road.
All right.
So first of all...
I am excited to get one that I like, though. I am excited.
There's 2 episodes I would like to show you, but if you can't stand to watch more than one episode, I understand.
Well.
But the episode I wanted to show you is an episode that involves no business at all. No one's livelihood is on the line.
There's a quizzical look on my face for the benefit of the listener. I did not know that Nathan's for us at non-businesses. That was a sentence.
There's a handful of episodes where that is the case. It will all become clear soon. There's another episode I can show you where there is a business involved. This is one instance where there's actually more than one, but it's an instance where the idea that he proposes actually works, and it works exactly the way it's supposed to work. And
spoiler alert,
in the end, everyone's happy, and the business owner is actually moved by the experience.
Well,
and
I'm interested.
I'm just telling you that up front because the joy of the episode, and I mean, for me, the joy of most episodes is the journey of how to make the idea work requires so many ludicrous steps where it just you wind up in places that you can't even imagine.
Okay.
And that is the real beauty of the show. I mean, I'm
intrigued.
I love this show. One of my favorite comedies, if not my favorite comedy of the last 10 years. Inventive, very creative.
All right.
And also, I think it's a great work of satire. I put it up there with Chris Morris, who Nathan Fielder has cited as an influence. And also, Chris Morris, when we're talking about issues of...
I mean, again, Chris Morris wrote satire for stuff that doesn't actually happen. And again, that may be my hurdle.
Okay, before we get there, though, I'm starting you off on a non-business episode, but there's a couple things I want to address. I did some cursory research. It's not perfect, but I did want to look into the impact that Nathan has had on these businesses, which there's a couple articles.
Well, should we watch first and then you tell me this later?
I wanted to address this up front because I know that a big concern of yours was what happens to these people.
It is. Yeah, I think that may be one of the hurdles. So.
There's a couple articles that I looked up, and of course, this is not perfect, but I have not found a single instance of him hurting someone's business, if you can believe that.
I mean, that does make a difference to me. If his amusement was, well, I'll fuck around and this will be the subject of my show. Oh, I ended up bankrupting a company, a little mom and pop shop down the road. Well, but it was funny though, right? Like, I want to also stress, I didn't get the sense that he would be that cruel, thoughtless. But it always just struck me as like, but how can you guarantee that?
There's one article that I found that came out, I think about a year after the first season aired.
Okay.
This journalist actually contacted both that frozen yogurt shop and there's also a pizza place featured in the same episode. Both of them reported an uptick in business after their appearance on the show. It did not hurt them at all. Well, not like huge, because this was not a very successful show, at least at first.
I suppose you're right. Like, it's unlikely that even the poo flavored yogurt, there's going to be people who are going to be fascinated by that and genuinely want to do it. There's other going to be people who are like, what? But now I've heard of that company, so I want to go see, do they have strawberry? Like, oh, they do. Oh, and it was good. So you're right. It's probably, yeah.
In reality, I think it made so little impact on the daily operations of that place.
Okay. That does make me feel better.
One thing that tends to be true about the businesses that they showcase on the show is that these aren't struggling businesses.
Why do they hire him then?
For promotion, to be on TV.
That's fair. That's a good point.
They are in Los Angeles. I think more for convenience than anything else. But so this isn't like kitchen nightmares. These aren't people on the brink of bankruptcy where there's rats in the kitchen and they have to have their whole lives kind of turned around. These aren't desperate people.
I will admit, you are making a convincing argument enough that I'm already like, maybe I will like this.
Oh, God. Wow. This is already going better than I imagined.
I think we're good. I like it now. No, I'm excited to start watching it too because
Good. Okay, well, geez, should I change my plan again? I don't know.
No. Stick to the plan.
All right. So,
well, I mean, you do whatever you want. Again, I come into this always with an open mind.
Okay.
This one's tougher because I had enjoyed what I'd seen of The Simpsons. It had just been very limited. This is one where I'm already like, well, how can I like this? But I'm open to the idea that you can convince me.
Oh, great. Okay.
I wouldn't say I come in with a tabula rasa, but I come in with I'm going to put all my preconceived notions into a closet. But with this one, I'm going to open that closet at the end of this, and like Fibber McGee and Molly, all that stuff's going to come right out of an updated reference.
Okay, well then...
That one's only 80 years old.
I'm feeling good about this. So the first episode I want to show you, actually, they're both from season 4, the fourth and final season. The first episode is...
After he'd found his stride, cheater.
Episode number 5 is called The Anecdote.
Okay.
The second episode is going to be episode 2 called The Richard's Tip.
Ooh. So we're starting with season 4, episode 5, and then we're going to go to season 4, episode 2?
Correct.
Wow, you are cheating. No, I'm kidding. That's the point of this podcast.
And we'll be back on the other side.
All right.
And this is the part where I summarize the episodes we watched so that the following conversation makes sense. Though I encourage you to watch these episodes even if Phil does not. In Season 4, Episode 4, The Anecdote, Nathan wants to avoid a boring appearance on the Jimmy Kimmel Show, so he concocts the perfect talk show anecdote, based on recurring motifs found in every talk show anecdote, a mono-anecdote, if you will. There's just one problem. It's made up. Not wanting to go on TV and lie, he orchestrates a series of events that guarantees the anecdote really happened. This requires him to, among other things, get invited to a wedding and find someone to volunteer their mother's ashes. In Season 4, Episode 1, The Richards Tip, Nathan proposes to a restaurant owner that they hire a celebrity impersonator to leave a $1,000 tip, thus ensuring a story that gets into the news. The celebrity they choose? Disgraced Seinfeld actor Michael Richards. They find an impersonator who's up to the task, but to pull it off, they need a credit card with the name Michael Richards. These are but a few of the complications Nathan faces in the episodes we watched. But what does Phil think? Dear listener, you're about to find out. And we're back. Let me just say, as an observer, I did notice you laugh a few times, so that's something.
I have a very mixed reaction.
I also noticed...
And I admit, I laughed a lot. I laughed about half the time.
I noticed you staring in disbelief and squirming with discomfort many times.
Yes.
Perhaps through the majority of it, so let's...
I'd give it close to 50-50. I'd say it's like 40-60. I think I laughed 40% of the time. I was 60% kind of reviled. Maybe that's a little generous. Maybe 35-65. But I guess I'll give you my reaction. The things I found funny were hysterically funny. And I think part of it's that there's that deadpan quality to it that I really like. It's very witty in this exceptionally dry way. The irony of what he's saying, what the reality is, and that chasm of disconnect is very funny. And there's a certain point at which it starts to get kind of elaborate and it starts to irritate me, but then it gets to be just a level of such elaborateness that I'm like in awe and I'm like almost in reverence. Like, you really just pushed this to 3 times what I would consider to be excessive. And you're like so beyond that I'm like, no, this is actually really kind of funny that you went to these lengths. So that's what I liked. On the other side, there is a point at which I get to where I find it irritating, where I'm like, no, you've really just taken this to way too much. I think the deadpan humor is okay up to a point, but then it starts to become like, there were times when I actually wrote down, I think he's being rude here. His reaction to one of the impressionists was just kind of like, I don't know. If I'd been on the receiving end of it, I would have been a little hurt. My biggest problem with it is this. He is messing with people's lives, and he's doing things to them that they can't really change. Now, they're all agreeing to it, but some of these people may not totally be thinking it through. And let me say this, Michael Richards, for all of his faults, had no say in what happened here today. And I don't like the fact, I mean, there might have been something going on in his life. You never know. I mean, this is very unlikely because, as he pointed out, who wouldn't want to be told, like, you just gave $10,000, what a generous guy. But who knows, maybe there was some deal that Michael Richards was trying to do where it said, please do not give any big donations. That happens from time to time. And suddenly this happens, and he has to, I mean,
yeah,
obviously...
but that would not be, I mean, the evidence
but
that...
he could then prove, right, you could go, that wasn't me, that was a different guy.
It would never be binding.
It's one of those things where you know there's going to be people without this episode, until this episode aired, who might even go, well, what is Michael Richards doing? That was obviously a PR stunt. And he'd have to go, I didn't do anything. And of course, like, it's one of those things in like a thriller or a weird comedy where you go, yeah, but I didn't do that. And everyone's like, well, why on earth would anybody go to these lengths to do this? I mean, nobody would spend clearly like $35,000 to pull this like cockamamie nonsense off. So for a while, Michael Richards' life could have actually been thrown.
Oh, I don't know.
So who knows? Like, he doesn't know for sure that he's not going to do anything. Now, do I feel that much for Michael Richards? No, but like, you know what I mean? Like, he's a celebrity, and he, you know, he's also slightly persona non grata, I guess, per se. But I also don't think he deserves to have just something happened in his name without his consent, I guess. I don't know. There's something about it that just feels, I see what you're doing, but it's just too, I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but I'll leave it there for now. I want to hear your response to my criticisms.
Well, okay, now that we're on the other side of this,
Yes.
we've sat through 2 episodes. One of the things I like about this show is it reveals the way reality shows are made, which is they are completely made up.
Yes.
And you didn't see this happen in these episodes in particular, but there have been instances where, for example, Nathan will ask somebody to do something and they'll say no. And he says, well, could you just pretend to do it for camera? And they say, oh yeah, I'll pretend to do it for camera, sure.
That's interesting. That's fascinating.
Functionally, there's no difference between doing something and pretending to do it. But the thing is, the difference between this and a reality show is that he leaves that part in. Well, he leaves it in if it's funny. If it suits the narrative, he'll leave it out. Because I think there are a number of instances where they portray something as worse than what actually happened.
I was thinking that.
If it's funny. Now, that's not to say, now I don't want to come on here and pretend that everything he does is ethical and good and moral. That is not an argument I will win.
I think that's my problem. Like, okay, I'll put it this way. You could argue, okay, that couple that was having the wedding did say the words, yes, I guess you can come.
So I'm invited, I guess, or just invited to look.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was now an undeniable fact that I was invited to a real wedding.
But he did it in a way that was manipulative. They kind of felt stonewalled and up against a wall and like trapped. And at the end of the day, he crashed their wedding. And, you know, okay,
well,
in terms of all things that have ever happened, it's not a huge deal. But on the other hand, fuck you.
That's the version that we saw. On the other hand, they have a high definition taping of their wedding, which that may have been part of it. There could have been negotiations that we're simply not privy to.
There could have been, but what actually happened, Jeremiah?
I don't know. That's the thing.
Yeah,
I don't know.
And honestly, what I'm saying right now is it left a bad taste in my mouth that he basically manipulated himself to go into this wedding. Now, obviously, he didn't do it so that he could mooch off, be a wedding crasher. He did it for the sake of this show. But on the other hand, why does his show supersede these people's feelings and what they want to do on their wedding day?
But that's the thing. It's a matter of if I truly believed things happened the way they were portrayed, I would have a problem with it. But
Yeah, that's fair.
For example, there's one where it's a gift shop and the premise is they're pretending to film a movie with the hopes that people will gather around and then want to participate as extras pretending to be shoppers, except they're actually shopping. A woman is seemingly tricked into spending like $100 of merchandise. Now, of course, that's what they show. Now, there is evidence based on things this woman tweeted the day of, was that she was paid for the day. She was basically paid as an extra. She wasn't tricked into anything.
So she used that money.
But what they show is that...
Yeah, okay.
And of course, the whole angle is that they're blatantly committing fraud. And so the whole... From there on, the lengths to which he has to go to actually avoid the charge of fraud. That's the rest of the episode. But the thing is, if what they did was what they portrayed, they couldn't get away with that. Like, that would be so obviously...
Well, and I think that that's the other thing. It's sort of like, how do I make my business more successful? If you're going to spend this much effort, call up Michael Richards and go, hey, win-win here. Do you want to donate $10,000 of your money to do this? And he goes, no, but I'll donate $1,000 and I'll tip $1,000 and my image might look slightly better. And this place has, that's obviously what they should have done. I know that's the joke, but something this inefficient, it A, just starts to irritate me, but B, as you just kind of pointed out, the sort of ethical nature or unethical or the fraud, like basically what this episode was, a bunch of people lied and hooray. And I'm kind of like, God, it's so irritating.
For me, the ethical question, I mean, obviously, when they approach a business, they conceal the fact that it's a comedy.
Sure.
Which, of course, I mean, that's what Sacha Baron Cohen does. That's what Chris Morris did. That's an ethical question that's always a factor in these. And as you say, these are real businesses. But I think, again, they're not approaching businesses that are actually desperate. In fact, very often these are businesses that are doing pretty well.
It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter because what I'm saying is if they were desperate and this is what pushed them under, yeah, I'd have a bigger issue with that. My point is I'm kind of like, from what you've told me at the first half, these companies tended to do better after having this man injected into their veins anyway. So like, whatever. But on the other hand, I'm kind of like, right, but if you actually add up what happened, on the one hand, I watched of such elaborate nature to get this thing off the ground. Okay, that's funny. But it also really happened. So what I also watched was a bunch of people say a bunch of lies. You guys all lied that Michael Richards came here and gave a $10,000 tip. Like, if I honestly, if I'd heard about that without the comedy show attached to it at least gives context. But if I'd heard about that in the wild, I'd go, I don't think I'd ever darken the doors of that establishment again. Like, I'd be like, these people lied and went to that thing just to get a few extra people to sit in their seats. Like,
Oh, I don't know.
no, but I mean, honestly, my reaction would be like, I don't think I want to go to a restaurant owned by someone who would do that. I find the whole thing so bizarre. I'll be honest. Again, I like close to 50% of it. I liked what you said. Let's point out how reality shows are really made. They're not reality at all. We all kind of knew that, but this is the extent to which they're really just so fabricated. I love that. One of the things I absolutely love, I'm going to get away from the negativity for just a second. His ability to break down why every talk show interview at a certain point is an inane repeat of something you've already seen. Like, when I was in my 20s, I loved watching talk shows. And there was a certain point I just stopped, and I don't really realize why. And it was watching this, I kind of went, you know what, maybe that was it. I'd watch them for a few years and then kind of went, this is the same thing over and over again. And there is a nature of them that are like that. So to me, there was something really interesting that he was able to break that down and go tacitly saying, by the way, this is what you watch every single night. It's the exact same episode, but change the star. And I loved that. On the other hand, going back to this episode where I just basically watched a bunch of people lie, I just go like, ugh, why? It ceases to be funny to me, and it just grates on me and leaves a bad taste in my mouth.
Oh, dear. Well, I did try. Although I called this a 50, as you say, I succeeded halfway.
I'll put it this way. I liked more than I expected. What I liked it 100% of my being. What I hated with 100% of my being. So it was a very strange reaction where I'm like, I love his deadpan humor. But okay, I'm going to say this too. Here are two other shows or beings that do something similar that I do tend to like. Max Fosh on YouTube does similar things where he goes, I want to be the richest person on the planet. So he creates a corporation. He sells a share for $50, but because he has 10 trillion shares, he now owns, in quotation marks, $70 quadrillion, whatever it is. Technically, if he were to liquidate his company today, he could have this money. But it's obviously fraudulent, and he actually quickly dissolves the company before anyone can accuse of him being, fraud. I'll tell you this too. He starts to grate on me too. But at least he's always the target of the bizarreness. He's the one owning the company. The other show is Nirvana, the band, the show.
Oh, I don't know that.
And I've put it down on the list. We are going to watch that.
Oh, good. Okay.
Without giving too much away, Nirvana, the band, the show is created by a guy named Matthew Johnson. It's a fictionalized documentary about a band called Nirvana, the band. Mm-hmm. And this is a show called Nirvana, the band, the show about this band called Nirvana, the band. One of my favorite gags, I'm sorry, I'm going to give this away. And if you don't want a spoiler, cut ahead about 10 seconds. He says, we have a cease and desist letter. Apparently there's another band that already has part of our name. There's already another band called The Band. I thought that was great. And one of the things he does is he has a plot that involves him and his buddy Jay being these two members of this fictional band. Then when they go out and actually interact, they do things with basically this like fly on the wall camera thing. People know that they're being filmed. They go, hey, we want a photograph of our band. Could you take it for us? And they're like, yeah, don't smoke a cigarette in your picture. Like, we're inside. I don't want you to smoke. And they go, yeah, but it's cool. And like, they do similar things. But again, in my opinion, they're the target. They're the ones that look like idiots. And the person there looks like, your average person going, well, who are these two eccentrics in my office trying to get a picture? They have a story laid out, a loose story, kind of like Curb Your Enthusiasm, but they've even said, like, when somebody reacts a certain way and says something that actually makes us realize, oh, we now do this, or that's got to be it. She said, go look like a cool band, and we looked at bands, and then we did this, and that's why we looked this bizarre, because we decided to look like, the Byrds, and so we have these velvet jackets on now, because she said it. So they incorporate some of the reality, this genuine stuff. But again, I think the reason I thought that they were exceptionally clever is that you could tell that the line as to what was real and what was fake and who was a shill and who was a real person is very blurred, and they're never the targets. The makers, Jay and Matt, are the targets. And I love that. It's the same cringe, awkward humor. There's an element of reality to it. There's an element of fiction to it. But to me, that is exactly what this type of thing, for me to enjoy it, needs to be.
Right. I just don't think anyone's life has been changed by this. In fact, again, in the research that I did, some people even seem to forget that they had anything to do with this show. They say, what is that?
That makes me feel better.
I don't know. I've worked a lot of retail jobs. I've worked at a lot of coffee shops. So many of the people and experiences you have are so forgettable, even when a camera crew shows up. I've been in those situations. So I don't know. I just don't think he's making as big of impact. I think at most he is, yes, making people uncomfortable, which I don't think is morally wrong, but...
No, especially if later they see that it was a comedy show.
I admit there is a mean-spiritedness sometimes. I can't deny that. And I still laugh at it. I don't know what that says about me as a person.
You're a horrible person. No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. But see, he would not
For me, Nathan Fielder walks a line. Like, I don't know how you feel about Sacha Baron Cohen.
So I have tried twice to watch Borat, and I could not make it through it. And it's just because I feel like his points are so good. Like the fact that he could get a bunch of people to sort of show that if they're not anti-Semites, they're okay with it just being present. You know, I think that that's something that when he exposes it, I'm like, good for you. That shouldn't just be swept under the rug. He should be exposing that in the movie. So I love it. But on the other hand, like most of that movie, I find to be so irritating and so beyond a line. Like when he goes into the feminist group and says clearly misogynist things, I kind of go, right. But it's so huge what you're saying. Who wouldn't be offended? Like even people who aren't that involved and wouldn't even think, you know, these people that he's talking to clearly are involved, but even people who wouldn't be would go like, what the hell are you saying? Like, to me, it was low-hanging fruit. It's such an obviously offensive thing. It's just like, okay, so you found some people who were like, how dare you say that? It's like, yeah, but who wouldn't say that?
Right, yeah.
Aside from really far-out misogynist people who would agree with it in the first place, but that wasn't his point at all anyway.
Right. I only bring him up as an example because it's been a long time since I've seen Borat, but more recently he did Borat 2, which I thought was all right.
I didn't even bother.
His targets in that tend to be people you wouldn't sympathize with. For example,
which is
he
why
exposes and humiliates Rudy Giuliani in that, which, I mean, who gives a shit, right?
Right. That's kind of my point. Oddly enough, I know this sounds hypocritical after I've just said, like, Nathan's targets are other people. With Borat's case, the target are other people that probably deserve that scrutiny and scorn, but he's so obnoxious when he does it that it just goes way beyond the point and just becomes so ridiculous that the satire's lost and it's just kind of dumb to me.
I'm kind of 50-50 with him, actually.
And I've tried Borat twice, and again, I kind of walk away going, I wish I liked this more. Nathan, for you, is similar for very different reasons, where I'm like, I like what you're doing, exposing the mediocrity of reality television, the absolute falseness of reality television, just the lengths to which reality television goes. But to me, he's almost eating his cake and having it too, as he's engaging in very similar behavior. And I know that he's satirizing it, but he's also kind of doing it. And I kind of go, that's the level of satire where I'm like, no, you're enjoying this too.
That's an irony that I enjoy, the fact that he's so concerned about the ethics of what he's doing.
I loved that.
When what he's doing is so clearly unethical.
I loved that. Like, again, the Anecdote was definitely more my style. It involved him as the butt of the joke much more.
The satire of that is very clear.
Yes, I liked it better. But the crassness of asking a mother to have her ashes, that made my heart skip a beat, because I'm just like, oh my God, do you understand what you're asking this woman to do? Like, you're kind of quasi asking her to fast forward to the day after she's died.
Wow.
And ridicule her. Okay, here's the other thing. He found a person whose mother was still alive, which made it better. He was asking real people for his parents' ashes to do this. And there's a part of me that I'm like, no. Like, I mean, who knows? You might find someone who's like, nah, for me, this isn't sacred. But for me, I would be disgusted to either ask that or be asked
that. Well, that's why he asked it on Craigslist.
No matter what it's in the service of. What's that?
Let's be very clear. He asked it on Craigslist and was soliciting responses. These were people who were voluntarily.
But see, okay, the problem with that then is that...
No, I mean, you're not wrong.
You're preying on preying is too hard. He's found people willing to do this, but just the very act of asking in the first place, I don't know, there's a part of me that's like, some things maybe should be sacred, but again, you're right. There are people out there who probably like, oh, whatever.
Yeah, Yeah, I think that is part of the point. Nathan Fielder has said this in interviews that when they approach businesses, they tend to go with the people who they I mean, the goal is not to upset people. They want people who are kind of willing
mission not accomplished with me.
Well, I mean, the people who are participating is what I mean.
No, I understand.
Because, it's like when they're vetting a business, some people ask a lot of questions and seem very concerned, and they don't tend to go with those people because the goal is not to upset people.
That's good, at least.
The goal is to get authentic reactions from people. And also, again, a lot of the humor is just people kind of going along with what he proposes. It's kind of like, I don't know, are you a fan of Fitzcarraldo?
I don't know.
Oh, really? Werner Herzog?
I know Werner Herzog.
Fitzcarraldo is the Herzog film where Klaus Kinski, they move a steamboat over a hill, except they did it for real. In the film, he put everyone's lives at risk to actually move a steamboat. I kind of see Nathan For You as a comedy version of Fitzcarraldo, where it's not the people doing it, it's Comedy Central. Metaphorically, they're moving a steamboat over a mountain, but it's more Nathan Fielder proposing to these people, yeah, we're going to move a steamboat over a mountain, and just their reaction to that.
See,
the moment of
the problem I have, we can both say, and I would even agree with you on some level, that anybody being asked by Nathan to do one of his cockamamie schemes can always say no. But we know what humans are like, especially ones who have already said, sure, I'll be on your show. They tend to be a little more pliable and agreeable to suggestions. Because if you just go, no, I'm not going to do that, then you're seen as being rigid. And frankly, if someone goes, hey, I just made a cookie, want to try it? And you go, no. Yeah, like, why would you say that? So that level of logic is swimming around in their heads. So they go, oh, okay, yeah, I guess I will metaphorically pull a steam ship through a, and I think I think the one that bugged me the most was like the couple that's getting married, where they clearly like, no, and they said no like 3 or 4 times, and then they went, yeah. And I was like, ugh.
I knew that would be the scene you would have the most trouble with.
Really? You could predict that?
Nevertheless.
You predicted that? I
knew the hot spots. I knew where to...
Romance.
But the thing is,
that's sacred.
At least with that episode, because he's not helping out a business, that as a factor was just completely off the table. And,
I liked that.
We could delve deeper into what it was.
No, it's interesting because that was a variable that was suddenly just out. It wasn't even playing. And he is the target of how ridiculous that is for the most part. And even still, I found it irritating because he stamped down in the puddle and a little bit splashed on everybody that he touched.
I don't know if I told you, my wife and I, we once saw him live.
No.
When he was promoting the 4th season, he showed a part of an episode that was that hadn't aired yet.
Right.
And he did a Q&A. And I don't know if he always does this, but he did it this time where he says he doesn't like to just let people ask him a question. He wants to get to know them first. So he would select a person and then he would just chat with them for about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. And it was like watching an episode of his show because he is a bit of an interrogating interviewer, but he's also a great improviser. I mean, this show is nothing if not an improv game.
I agree with that.
With mostly amateurs.
And if I may, with mostly quasi-willing participants. They signed up thinking they were going to be on a show that helps their business. And they're technically on a show that helps their business, but it's a satirical show that helps businesses. And its goal is not to help the business. It's to be funny first. And to me, that's where the ethical line is clearly crossed.
Right. I mean, the thing is, if all they're looking for is help with their business, they could hire a strategist. They could do literally anything else.
Yeah, but that guy, I mean, his response was funny and also depressing, where he's like, what if we got a celebrity impersonator to come in and sign a check saying that they gave you $10,000, but it's actually your money? And his response of just being like, yeah, yeah. Like, it was brilliant, but it was also made me weep a little bit inside, where I'm like, oh. Because he also says, first thing, like, you're not Guy Fieri, aren't you? I mean, he doesn't say it exactly like that, but he's kind of like, can I get on that show, please? And he's like, well, I'm not that show. And he's like, oh, am I working with you on your show? Oh, okay.
But the reason I brought it up is that it's fascinating watching him interact with his own fans, like people who should know better. Because
it's a trap.
Even people who know what he does so easily fall into his traps. I mean, the thing is, like,
he is a trap. He doesn't have traps. He is the trap. There's no getting out of it.
One of his skills, he will hone right in on the most interesting thing about somebody, and he'll just draw. There's like one guy that he was talking to. The guy said, yeah, I don't believe in monogamy. And then this woman in the audience said boo, and so then he got this woman involved, so it becomes like a three-way conversation between Nathan, this guy, and this woman, and you just see this
I'm exhausted just hearing about
this was
it.
a cute
I'm very aware, Jeremiah, that if we start fielding emails about this episode, I know I'm in the minority. We're going to get a lot of response saying, Phil, you're wrong. This is going to be Bob's Burgers. Whenever we do Bob's Burgers, I have a very similar reaction to that for similar reasons. We can get into that on that episode.
Well, see, here's the thing. When I first tried to get you into the show, you were not in the minority because most people didn't know about the show. That was my big frustration at the time. Now it's caught on because now it's more accessible to the point where when his new show, The Rehearsal, came out, suddenly everyone knew who he was, and there was even a whole discourse. Like, that startled me.
So I'll be honest, before I even knew that we were going to be doing Nathan For You, I saw that he had a new show, and I went, well, maybe it was the fact that he was messing with people's businesses, and I don't really like that. The fact that you've told me that most of them actually had an uptick, from the thing, that makes me feel better, and maybe I was being overly sensitive. But when I saw that he had a new show, I did kind of go, you know what? Again, tabula rasa, maybe I'll like this version of it. And I watched like a 2-minute trailer of it, which I don't usually do. And I hated it. And I was like, nope, I'm not going to like this. I love cringe humor when it's like scripted, but reality, now.
And that's a show that challenges me more so than Nathan For You. Which is not to say I don't like it, but I mean,
but that is saying something.
If Nathan For You twisted you into a pretzel, this goes so much further. But I think also, just to give one thing away,
spoil
on
as
one
much
hand,
as you want. I'm not going to watch it.
Well, it's like on one hand, yes, he does things that go further than what he would do on Nathan For You, but also the guy that he's doing it to, for example, turns out to be an anti-Semite. Or no, what I should say is there's a guy who says something anti-Semitic casually to Nathan, who is Jewish, and that moment passes. Nathan sort of quietly acknowledges it.
Cheapers.
And then later in the episode, he puts the guy in a situation that's kind of fucked up. I'm not going to say what it is. And of course, the show doesn't connect these two events, but it's afterwards, it's like, I see what he was doing.
I mean, that's clever. I like that. Again, going back to the Borat thing, I think that's the sort of thing that is worthy of scorn and scrutiny. And I don't feel bad for the target of something like that.
He goes further in this show, but I think the stakes are slightly different, or just he's doing it to people where it's a little more complex. But
I guess my conclusion is this. He's brilliant. He's exceptionally, he's very smart, perfect timing on his deadpan awkwardness. I think he's brilliant. I think that what he's doing is brilliant. And I think his pointing out weirdnesses and hypocrisies and showing the lengths to which some people will go to do whatever to get on TV, to fix their business, to do whatever. I actually like all of it in theory. And I like even what he's doing specifically. Again, it was not just me sitting here the entire time going like, how can anybody like this? I see the appeal. In fact, a lot of it did appeal to me. And I think he's brilliant.
Well, that was my goal.
But there was too much that irritated me and too much that I found unpleasant and crossing some lines for me, or at least skirting them and dipping back and forth, having one foot on and one foot off the line, that ultimately I would not check this out unless you said, Phil, I want to do one more. Like that other episode you were mentioning, like, oh, I could have done this one, but I didn't. Like, I'll be honest, when you said that, I'm like, let's pop it on right now. I am intrigued, but I'm now at the point where I think I can very confidently say I do not think I will ever check out the rest of this show. I can confidently say I will not do this on my own.
Yeah, I don't think there's an episode that would turn you around completely. I feel like every experience you would have would be compromised. At the same time, now you can see what other people see in it. And that was really all I was trying to...
I think I saw this a little bit to begin with. But again, it was so grating. I said, I don't need to see it anymore. I know I don't like it. I understood and understand better now why people like it. But again, it just pushes too many of my buttons to be... for this one, unfortunately, to be a success. I mean, I'll tell you this. In full spirit of Nathan, I'm kind of glad that we have one here that we disagree on.
I know.
I actually do think it's interesting. I like the fact that you and I have a Venn diagram set that has a lot of overlap. And so finding that stuff in the little crescent moon shapes on the sides that are just ours and ours alone. I like that we don't always agree.
Yeah. I knew this would be the most contentious going in. There may be more to come.
I think this was probably your toughest sell. You got me ever so slightly more on board because the genuine laughs were guffaws. And I think what he did that made me laugh was some of the most clever stuff I've seen. So what works for me worked exceptionally well.
Yeah.
If I can end on a positive.
And that's why it's one of those shows where if my wife and I need to just laugh and just fall over and die.
I'll put it this way. For you guys, it's when you need a laugh. For me, it's when I run out of Ipecac. I might put this on. But in spite of it being very funny and very clever. I mean, hats off to Nathan. I will tip my hat to him because of what he did.
Well, it's interesting hearing the way people talk about it, because I have no idea what his career trajectory will be from here on, because people really talk about him as if he's a Batman villain.
Yeah.
Which is really...
He is an agent of chaos.
Yes, and I don't know what happens from here. He's not one to have a conventional comedy career, so...
Well, thank you for exposing me to something I definitely would never have picked up again. And for getting me to like more than I thought I would.
Good. I call that a success. I'm claiming it.
No, I'm not watching this again.
Whatever success there was, I am claiming it.
Yes. Okay, I agree. There was a success.
Honestly, more than I thought there would.
Okay, yes. So we'll focus on that.
I was so prepared to fail completely.
You have not successfully gotten me interested to watch more, but you have gotten me successfully to appreciate parts of it more than I expected. Yeah, and I agree with that. Yeah.
Good, and I will take that.
Yeah, let's end on that positive note.
This podcast was produced by Magali McDonald, edited by me. Music was by Silken Sommers. Please check out their Bandcamp. Follow us at Skip First Ep Pod on Instagram, Bluesky, that site that used to be Twitter. And finally, if you enjoyed our podcast, please consider giving us a rating on your preferred app. Every little bit helps.